let's talk about the Utah Jazz because there is a lot going on in Jazzland. And obviously, with the season coming to an end, a disappointing season, a disappointing ending, there's a lot of silliness. There's a lot of ridiculousness floating around the rumor sphere, if you will, about what changes are going to be made. And before we get into what we've heard this week about Quin Snyder's situation, we got a lot of information on Rudy Gobert's exit interview for you. I want to play this bite by Justin Zanik, the general manager of the Utah Jazz, because I think it's incredibly interesting to listen to Justin Zanik talking about this team and really saying nothing at all.
We'll get into a lot of that stuff in the offseason. I think, Quinn said it before in previous years too, where I think there's an assumption that because we've had some of the same core players that the team is always the same or the seasons are always the same. So, you did this in this year, so why couldn't you do it this year later? Look, every team is different and every season is different. There's different trials and things that you go through. And, we'll try to figure out where we can use the great resources of our ownership group and the support of our fans and organization to address that. Every team is going to have flaws, and frankly, at varying times during this season, there's going to be 28 other teams that are going to be not happy with the result. So this is our time now, and this is our chance to continue to prepare, as every offseason is, to continue to do that.
See, the thing I don't understand about that bite is you didn't really say anything there. And when you talk about continuity and the same players, and we've had the same players, and, it's different teams and different reasons, but all those reasons are the same, and all the issues are the same. Because you're a one-trick pony on this team, because largely over the last 6 years, you have not changed the core grouping of this team. Really, over the last 4 years, you haven't changed the grouping of this team. And if you look at the last 3 years, this team is almost exactly the same. You are, Bogey, you are Don, you are Rudy. Obviously, the Mike Conley trade was a big change. The decision to re-sign Mike Conley was a big change. But the players over the last 3-4 seasons really haven't changed that much. And the issues with this team really haven't changed that much. You continually get beat by teams that are more athletic. And it's interesting. I want to also play this bite from Justin Zanik talking about Quin Snyder, because it's interesting to hear almost the excuse of, hey, we've played 3 seasons in 2 years. And I think it's very interesting listening to Justin Zanik talk and say nothing really at all.
So, look, I think we've always been transparent about this, and I don't know how I can make it any more clear. Quin Snyder is one of the best coaches in the NBA. There is no other partner that I would rather have as a coach, a leader of our players, and a partner in the front office than Quin Snyder.
Jazz general manager Justin Zanik talking about Quin Snyder. I guess that's as supportive as he's going to be. That's pretty supportive, right? But nobody follows up with, hey, what do you want Quin Snyder to do better? Hey, what do you need from your head coach to do better? I don't know. I felt like this press conference was a waste of time. I don't know that we got a whole lot out of it because, I don't know what you would expect Justin Zanik to say. Mm-hmm. Oh, Quin Snyder, he's got to play young guys or he's not going to be here as our head coach. He's not going to say that. He's not going to say anything like that. I think when you look at Quinn's influence on this organization, the moment Dennis Lindsey left, it only got stronger, right? I think we've talked about for the last year, we've told you there would be no change with Quin Snyder. And I think the decision around Quin Snyder, as I was told again on Friday, Quin Snyder's going to decide whether he's here or not. The Utah Jazz are not going to fire Quin Snyder. The Utah Jazz are not looking to make a change with Quin Snyder. They're focused solely on their roster. That's where the Jazz are. But when you hear Justin Zanik talking. What are your feelings about what he said?
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's coach speak. I think it's classic, front office PR guy talk, and I understand that any front office guy doing a press conference is going to come with talking points and is going to be real general about things. They like to avoid answering things specifically. So to a degree, I understand that, but I think also when someone asks you like, hey, like what. Like the continuity thing, they kind of softballed him a question after that where it was like, hey, well, you have continuity. How do you balance keeping continuity but also getting better? Whereas the question should have been like, hey, yeah, you've had continuity. Continuity is one of the most important things in the league to winning a championship. You say you have it, but you haven't won anything. That's what the question should have been. So when I hear Justin Zanik talk, what I hear is a guy who doesn't get asked blunt questions. What I hear is somebody who has it pretty easy as far as his relationship with the media. And I think that that's just kind of the situation that we have in Salt Lake. I do wish that, he was a bit more blunt about it. I wish he would say something like, yeah, like we have this continuity, but clearly we're missing something. Clearly there's a piece that we just haven't figured out yet. And that's going to be goal number one this offseason. I just wish the tone was more like matter of fact. Like, hey, X, Y, and Z question. Well, yeah, we're going to figure that out in the offseason. But right now, 12 hours post losing to Dallas, yeah, I think the issue is we have continuity. But that continuity wasn't enough to carry us to where we want to go, which was to be, as the Jazz organization has said, to be the last team standing. That's kind of been their talking point. So, yeah, when I hear him talk, I feel like he just kind of softballs and talks around the point. Whereas I wish, and I feel like we do hear it from other people, like Doc Rivers is a decent example. Doc Rivers often will just say it how it is. He gets criticized for that, but I appreciate that about Doc. I don't agree with everything he says, but I do appreciate it. I do appreciate the bluntness with which he talks. So, yeah, when I hear Zanik talk, I just am like, man, like, just say it straightforward.
Just spit it out.
Like, just speak it, dude.
Now, I've been covering the NBA for a lot of years, and I've heard a lot of press conferences. I've sat in a lot of postseason exit interviews, and a lot of times you just don't say anything because this is a very emotional time for basketball teams. I mean, you just ended your season, frankly, in a way that is not what I would call pleasing for you, right? I mean, there's a lot of disappointment around the way this season ended for the Utah Jazz, but I also think that this is why the Jazz operate with autonomy in this town, because there's nobody questioning them. There's nobody asking follow-up questions. Like, you can go through that press conference, and there is not a pointed follow-up question. Like, hey, I understand that, there's no other coach you'd rather work with, but you have had 6 years of playoff disappointment consecutively with the same head coach. What does Quin Snyder need to do better to help this team win?
Look, we'll get into a lot of that stuff in the offseason.
Right? Like, they ask the question at least, right? Hey, you say that, you're happy with your continuity and you're glad that the players have been together and there's value in that. What is the value of that continuity when you've lost in the playoffs 6 years in a row and you are now incredibly disappointed and got knocked out in the first round by the Dallas Mavericks? How valuable is that continuity to the Utah Jazz? Because that continuity is not won you a damn thing.
Yeah.
And my feeling is that when you look at the way that this organization is structured, with Danny Ainge sitting at the top of the ladder now, just under Ryan Smith, I think Justin Zanik is the mouthpiece. I know for a fact Danny Ainge doesn't like talking to the media.
Yeah.
I know for a fact that Danny Ainge would rather be invisible. I know Danny Ainge doesn't enjoy the public forum in almost any situation. So I think Justin Zanik's a guy that's going to fill that role for them. We'll see what happens. We'll see, are they going to make trades to bring in draft stock? Are they going to, accommodate Rudy Gobert? Because I can tell you this, sources told me on Friday and Saturday that Rudy Gobert is genuinely unhappy with his role on this team. And Rudy Gobert feels like he is a scapegoat for the defensive struggles of this team. And Rudy Gobert believes that he should have a larger role in the offense. And from what sources have told me, and I have verified it twice over, Rudy Gobert told the Utah Jazz that while he's not wanting to be traded, he would welcome a trade if it puts him in a better situation. He is not going to stand in the way of the Utah Jazz moving him. And there is some question. The one thing that I have not been able to discern directly is, did Rudy Gobert say, hey, I'll welcome a trade to a contender, which I asked specifically and did not get a detailed response on. But there's no doubt that Rudy Gobert voiced his displeasure with the way this team is set up. And the other thing that came out of that conversation was that there is no doubt that Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell had significant issues coexisting in this locker room, as we reported from December on. And I think that's the number one thing that you have to get right, because Donovan Mitchell has told the Utah Jazz that he is going to be here for some time. Donovan Mitchell has told the Jazz, and the Jazz have told Donovan Mitchell, again, as we first reported back in January, I believe it was in our video on January 18th, and you can go back and watch that the Utah Jazz are committed to Donovan Mitchell. They met with him multiple times. They have told Donovan Mitchell repeatedly, we are going to build this roster around you. We are going to build a roster that plays to your strengths, and you're going to be the center of what we do. And that's what we all are anticipating. I can tell you that Donovan Mitchell has not, in any way, shape, or form, said, I'd like to be traded. I'd be open to a trade. I'm demanding a trade. Donovan Mitchell has said none of that to the Utah Jazz. Rudy Gobert, point blank last week, told the Jazz, I'd be open to a move. And that tells you a lot of different things about his character. This tells you pointedly that Rudy Gobert, if he's ever going to be anything in this league other than the 3-time Defensive Player of the Year, if he truly, because I think Rudy Gobert truly believes that he is an offensive force, and he's not. And the problem with Rudy Gobert is he doesn't have anybody telling him the truth, and that includes the Utah Jazz.
Yeah.
He doesn't have anybody that's willing to stand up to him and say, we can't give you the ball, which apparently was the source of 4 or 5 locker room exchanges this year that were not productive, when Rudy Gobert was demanding that they throw him the ball in the post. And when they did, it just did not end well. And from what I was told over the weekend, Rudy Gobert was presented with facts, statistics. He was given a video package that showed where his shortcomings on offense are. And he was given a video package in April, early April. They went to Rudy Gobert and had an individual film study with him where, from what I was told, they pointed out to him, hey, you need to be better. We've got to have a better Rudy Gobert on the pick and roll. Stop dropping. That dropped to the basket, and I'm told it came to a head in the Houston game where he allowed Christian Wood to shoot a wide open 3 to send that game to overtime.
Yeah.
That's where that all came to a head. I think you're looking at a situation where I don't think you have a choice here. I think you have to trade Rudy Gobert. And I know that they had conversations about that at the trade deadline, but when you look at teams that have shown the most interest in Rudy Gobert, the Utah Jazz are not trading Rudy Gobert to the Dallas Mavericks. That is not happening. And I think one of the things that is very clear is that they would like to trade him to an Eastern Conference team. And, I saw all of the talk this weekend about, hey, Charlotte in a trade that would return Gordon Hayward to the Utah Jazz. I just don't see that that's an option.
Yeah.
Gordon Hayward has lost significant athletic mobility since his leg injury, which is what the Jazz are trying to avoid. He is a better version of Bojan Bogdanovic. I would agree with that. But Bojan Bogdanovic and Gordon Hayward, one's not an upgrade to the other. You're trading like for like. So that deal doesn't make a lot of sense. And if you are going to move on Rudy Gobert, I would remind you that it's not a 1-for-1, a like-for-like trade. That's going to be a minimum 3-team deal. It is so difficult when you're paying the luxury tax to trade a Rudy Gobert 1-for-1 to another team. It's almost impossible to do that.
Yeah, and I think, when I hear, these trade rumors and the fact that they're not exactly willing to just bluntly tell Rudy, like, hey, like, you are not good enough offensively for us to be feeding you. It kind of starts, at least in my mind, I start to kind of put some pieces together here. And you start to kind of understand, like, I think that, in the organization, and this is an opinion, but I think in the organization, some real, like, truth, bluntness about where you are might be necessary. Again, let's take it back all the way to the beginning of the season. This organization and this team came into the season with the stated goal of winning a championship. Again, being the last team standing. Right there on this show, we told you that was a problem. We told you that re-signing Mike Conley and paying the luxury tax to do it, like to try and win a championship, wasn't good enough. That this group plus Mike Conley was not good enough. So that's why I say, like, whether we're talking about Zanik, whether we're talking about, their relationship with Rudy, whether we're talking about Don and what he's got going on, this organization just needs to be more honest, be more blunt about where you are. It should not be some war crime to say that this team isn't championship quality right now. Like that, imagine what this organization could have got done if at the beginning of the year you said, hey, even with Mike Conley, I don't think that we're better than the Suns. I don't think that we're better than Memphis. I don't think that if we pay the luxury tax to get this guy, that's going to propel us to the NBA Finals. So that's why I say this. That's why I think, Danny Ainge, as much as his experience will be impactful, I think the way he goes about it will also be very impactful for the people around him.
Yeah, I don't know that there's an easy solution here. I really don't. I think one of the things that is very difficult is anytime you make a foundational trade, you better think twice about it. And I think the Utah Jazz have spent a considerable amount of time weighing the value of Donovan Mitchell, weighing the value of Rudy Gobert, weighing the value of Quin Snyder, because again, point blank on Saturday afternoon, I was told that Quin Snyder's our head coach as long as he wants to be. Right now, today, Quin Snyder's the head coach of the Utah Jazz as long as he wants to be. And, I also heard a lot about Quin Snyder and the Lakers on Saturday. And I think that the one thing that is very clear to me is that Quin Snyder's not interested in that job.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he just is not interested in that job. And I think that Quin Snyder has earned a lot of respect around this league for the job that he's done. Because let's be honest, he came into this Utah Jazz situation needing to do well. This was likely his last best chance at being a head coach in the NBA. I mean, the issues he had at Missouri, the tattered tales, the long journey through assistant coaching internationally in the G League with the Lakers, with the Spurs, like his journey had taken him right here and right now, and he has done a stellar job over the last 8 seasons. But I understand why so many people believe that the Jazz would be looking at a change. But I can tell you right now, unequivocally, my sources at the Utah Jazz tell me they are not even considering that.
Yeah.
He is their guy. And, we have heard really since the trade deadline that there had been friction between Quin and the team. And he was frustrated because they did not make a move to help this roster at the trade deadline. There was frustration over the net return on Joe Ingles' expiring contract, which frankly wasn't much. And that Quin Snyder is dealing with a little frustration and a little burnout. And again, I think his situation is still up in the air because from what I was told over the weekend, he has not said, yeah, I'm definitely back next year. They are taking a little time away from each other, and then they are going to reconvene in the coming week and really kind of go through the process. I don't think it is a hundo P that he's coming back. I really don't.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I would if I were a betting man, I would take this off my board because I don't think that it is all for certain that Quin Snyder is going to be the head coach of the Jazz.
Yeah.
I think there is a chance he resigns. We talked about it last week that he's a grinder. That's one of the things I think you have to realize about Quin Snyder. He's not the guy that's like, oh, well, the season's over, time to go fishing. Like, that's not Quin Snyder. Quin Snyder is a proud man. He is a prideful performer who takes every loss very personally. And you can see that it wears on him. And losing in the first round, losing the way they lost in the second half of the season, this team has not consistently had chemistry issues. That's the other part of this that I think is so important to talk about, that this chemistry situation really dating back to the last summer, this chemistry situation is one that is new to this locker room. And while it's not new now, they went through pretty much an entire season of bickering. and you look at what happened from really January through early April, this team was not enjoyable. This team did not enjoy being around each other. There was friction. The Rudy Gobert constant bitching and complaining. And I'm telling you, this started with his arguments with officials. All of those technical fouls that he racked up early in the season did not serve Rudy Gobert well in the locker room.
Yeah.
It didn't. And the funny thing is, you look at Bojan Bogdanovic, nobody complains to the officials more than Bojan. But you know what he doesn't do? He doesn't go into the locker room and chirp. He doesn't go into the locker room and go after guys. He doesn't get on social media and go after guys. And I think, and I know that incident where essentially Rudy Gobert called out Donovan Mitchell, and I think that was after the Suns game, where he calls out Donovan Mitchell, I think that was the last straw for the Utah Jazz. I think, and we've talked about this, there were a lot of people, if you go back to our shows that week, there were a lot of people telling us the Jazz were super pissed he did that. Super pissed they did that. Donovan handled it really well. Donovan Mitchell went back to work when that went down. Everybody knew what Rudy Gobert was doing. Donovan went right back to work, and for that, I give him a lot of credit. All of this to say that, again, I was told on Saturday that Rudy Gobert told the Jazz, hey, I am tired of being the scapegoat on defense, which you're not the scapegoat on defense. I don't know where that came from. And he's frustrated with his role in the offense. He believes that he should have a much larger chunk of the basketball on offense and that he would be open to a trade this offseason. He did not demand a trade. He did not say, I'm not going to play here anymore. You need to move me now. He simply said, I am open to moving to another organization if it ends the strife here.
Yeah.
If it puts me in a better position, which is, in my opinion, him saying, hey, if you're going to move me, send me to a contender. But they're not trading him to Dallas. They're not.
Yeah, and I saw all this nonsense on Twitter about, trading him to Golden State for Wiggins and a package of picks. They're not going to do that, dude. That doesn't make any sense for anybody. I mean, it just doesn't. Like, you have to understand, and when we said this on Thursday and Friday, like, you got to understand, like, don't just, like, I feel like on Twitter, and I guess, who's surprised? It's Twitter, right? But I feel like on Twitter a lot we see, well, Bleacher Report said this, or we heard this guy say that. What do you guys think of Rudy to the Warriors for Wiggins and some picks? Yeah, great, but the only problem with that is the Jazz are never trading him to the Warriors for picks because they're your next door neighbor in the Western Conference. You're not doing that. So that's why I say, like, again, you just have to wait for the NBA Finals to end, wait for the NBA to go into its true offseason, and then you will see things will start happening. I think if I'm the Jazz, I agree with you. I want to ship his ass out east, send him to Toronto, send him to somebody who's halfway decent out there, and just be done with it. Because the truth is, every single day that this guy's on your roster and you're still in this situation is just another day you're not moving forward towards the end goal, which is winning a championship with Donovan Mitchell.
Yeah, and I wonder how much they value the draft. I wonder, that's one question that is, I asked that a couple of weeks ago, like, hey, how seriously do you guys take the draft this year? Because you really don't have a whole lot of chess pieces to play with at this point, right? And, you get the standard pad answer. Well, of course, we value our young guys and we're trying to develop and we understand. You get the standard answers. But I don't know that they do value the draft. I think they recognize that there are very few Giannis-type talents in the draft where you can bring in an absolute raw product and build that product into a superstar. Those guys are very few and far between.
Yeah.
And I think that when you look at the way the NBA works today, I think you realize that it's a relationship-based business. And I think they realize one thing that Donovan Mitchell brings that Rudy Gobert absolutely does not. Donovan Mitchell has deep, lasting relationships with players around the NBA. There's a lot of guys who like Don and who would want to play with Donovan Mitchell. You look at all the players around the league, you look at all the teams around the league that are lining up to try and make an offer for Donovan Mitchell, the recruiting that goes on with Donovan Mitchell, that's because he's well respected.
Yeah.
But there's another part of this that I think people have to understand. When these situations happen, and when guys like Rudy Gobert melt down, and when you go all in on a guy like Donovan Mitchell, what ultimately happens? Well, the guys that we're talking about, Don and Rudy, get exposed. They get exposed one way or the other. My guess is Rudy Gobert is going to get exposed in the wrong way. If the Utah Jazz decide to trade Rudy Gobert and they get an offer that they like and they move him down the road, Rudy's either going to take a step up and he's going to become an MVP candidate every single year because he's going to average 25 points and 20 rebounds, and the Utah Jazz are going to look silly. But my guess is that Rudy Gobert is going to be marginalized. When he goes to another team that does not make him the center of their orbit, that does not say, hey, you got to try and throw Rudy the ball, that views Rudy differently. And my guess is they don't move him to a contender. My guess is he winds up with a low to mid-table team that's on the cusp of the playoffs. He would wind up in a Sacramento. He would wind up in a place like in Orlando.
Mm-hmm.
He would wind up in a place like in OKC. He'd wind up in a place like a Toronto, like a Washington. A mid-table team to a low-table team.
Yeah.
And if he is in that situation where, think about Toronto, because I still maintain, and I don't know what you think, Jake, but I still maintain Toronto is the most likely destination for Rudy.
Well, and I think it makes the most sense for the Jazz. Like, I think that's what, like, I honestly, I don't think the Jazz give a damn what Rudy thinks about where he's going to go. I think what they're looking at is, okay, this is how much the guy makes. Thus, these are our options. And they know, like in the, and I don't have it, but in the presser from Justin Zanik, he made a joke about the fact that they don't have picks. So they know that they're not going to do much in the draft for a couple of seasons. So if I'm Justin Zanik, the logical thing to do would be look at the numbers on paper and say, okay, who are the teams that I have talked to already who have expressed interest? And then in addition to that, who are the teams that I could go to and say, hey, what do you think about this? And I'm telling you, they are not trading him in the Western Conference. I will die on that hill, and I'm happy to look like an idiot if they do. It makes zero sense. There would be no reason for them to do that when you've got those teams you were just mentioning, Orlando, Toronto. You know, I know we were just talking about the fact that the Charlotte Gordon Hayward angle doesn't make sense, but I still maintain Charlotte might be a team that you could make something happen with. So that's why I say they just got to get this guy out of here. Get him out of here. Move on from this situation so you can start getting to building a team around Donovan Mitchell, man.
Yeah, and I think when you look at teams like Toronto's interesting because they have assets you're interested in.
Mm-hmm.
And they could also send those assets to other teams to make a multi-team deal. I don't know that Charlotte can do that. I know that the Jazz will not trade. I've been told point blank 3 times that the Jazz are not going to trade him to a Western Conference playoff team.
Why would
they will not do that?
Like,
yeah, why are you going to make Dallas better? Because he's a great fit with Dallas. Because Dallas is not going to pass him the ball.
Yeah.
He is. You are not going to take the ball. And I don't know, does Jalen Brunson end up staying in Dallas? I don't know. I have no idea. He's going to be expensive.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
But if it's just even Luka Doncic and a bunch of dudes, if you trade Rudy to Dallas and surmise you end up with a Dwight Powell or whoever, you end up with some of their pieces. Do you really think Luka's going to pass Rudy Gobert the ball in the post?
Well, what I think is that Luka is more of a bona fide superstar in the league than Don is currently. Not to say that he's an actual like pound for pound better player, but I think from a PR standpoint, he is a bigger superstar than Donovan Mitchell, and I don't think Rudy's going to be able to do what he does on the Mavericks that he does with the Jazz.
Well, and the other thing is when Rudy Gobert goes to a team like the Dallas Mavericks with Luka Doncic, and nobody says no to Luka.
Yeah.
Nobody says no to Luka.
He is that organization.
The shit that went on in the locker room here is not going to go on there because they're just not I mean, it's not your team. You've been here your entire career.
Yeah.
You've been here. You're established here. You're going to go to another team and you're going to wind up in a situation where you're going to struggle to be a leader.
Yeah.
You're going to wind up in a situation where nobody's going to care what you think.
Yeah, you got to earn your respect, and I think that's a really important point. But I want to touch on one thing. I know you were saying, hey, like it's hard to find a guy in the draft that can really change your fate.
Yes.
But I do agree with that generally speaking, but I think for the Jazz purposes, when you look at the Western Conference, How many of the good teams are built through the draft? Look at it. You've got Memphis, you've got the Suns, you've got the Warriors. You had the Sacramento Kings who were decent until they decided to trade Tyrese Halliburton. So you have these guys who are these teams that have done some nice things through the draft. The problem is because the Jazz have gone sideways so much, they're not able to be productive in the draft because they just don't have picks. So that's why I say, yeah, it's obvious that they're going to be more aggressive in the trade market. I think it would be obvious that you're going to pursue, things like the buyout market and free agency and all those other things because that's your path that you've laid. What other path do you have?
Yeah, I don't know that you have another path. I really don't. It'll be interesting to see what they do. Let's get some of your comments in here. What's up, Gabe Ledley? Good to see you. Rudy Sanchez, how the heck are you? Edgar Garcia, James Knight, Jeremy Bolton, Greg Hawkins, Forrest G, the Blind Swordsman. Blind Swordsman says, Gobert is not happy he's been given everything. Mitchell deserves more. By the way, I knew you would be right about building a team around Mitchell. Thank you. I appreciate that.
We'll get into a lot of that stuff in the offseason.
And Marcus had his comment tweeted. Marcus, I think his comment filtered.
Yeah.
But Marcus, I think this is the first time you've ever been here.
Uh-huh.
Marcus basically said, F you, you guys are wrong about everything. And he was referring to the Jazz, but he also made a comment about a super conference, right? So in 2014, when I worked at KFAM, we were talking about how Texas and Oklahoma and USC would like to form a super conference. Well, obviously, money changed, things happened. But by the way, where did Texas and Oklahoma go? Texas and Oklahoma went to the SEC.
Listen, man.
Which I think is hysterical.
Dude, listen. We've been talking about doing it. We'll put together a highlight reel of all the stuff that we've got right, and we'll put it as a featured video on our channel. That way, all you guys who come into the chat for the first time and hate have some documentation on everything that we've gotten right, just so you can feel a little better about yourself.
And you're never going to get everything right 100%. But I think if you've watched this channel specifically for the last year, because it's become our full-time job over the last 18 months, I don't think you can go back to anything BYU last year with Kalani Sitake's contract situation, we had his interview with Washington first. We told you almost word for word how that interview went.
The Oregon situation with Kalani, too.
I mean, this has not been rocket science. You're either right or you're wrong, right? In a lot of things, the problem for you guys with us is I don't really care about what other people think. It does not matter to me. I learned a long time ago that when you live your life, not for other people, but when you live your life without caring what those other people think of what you're doing and how you're doing it, your life becomes much simpler.
God bless.
It becomes much easier, right? And as far as the Jazz go, you know what? I see a lot of the people commenting that we're never right about anything. And listen, I again will just tell you, go back. It's all on video. It's all on video. Who was the first one that had the rumors about the locker room? And we turned those rumors into fact. Like, this has not been a good year for the Jazz.
Who was the first one to say when they signed that Rudy Gobert contract that they'd never win a championship with him and that they trade him in 2 seasons? Who was the first one to say that Mike Conley's deal would be a noose around their neck and it would not allow them to make moves?
And
right?
by the way, I think we also got the Joe Ingles trade right. I think we told you they were going to trade him.
Bro, we told
last July, I believe, was the first time I watched the video on it the other day. I think it's July 27th, if I remember right. I could be wrong by a day
we told you they were going to trade him even when the owner was tweeting they weren't going to trade him. Like, how much more, and this is what I say. Listen, at the end of the day, there's always going to be these guys or gals that come in here and say, oh, you guys are wrong.
And we need you.
But the funny thing is, here's the funny thing. This is what always ends up happening. And please, for the people who are long times, back me up on this. We always get these, I can't remember the guy's name. Driftwood came in here months ago and said, oh, you guys are idiots and don't know anything. And then he came around in like 6 weeks when we got a bunch of stuff right. Like, we see it all the time. So it's fine. The funny part is, to your point, please comment, hate on us. Awesome. It helps the show.
It really does.
Please come in here and tell us we're idiots. It's fine. We don't care because the fact is like, you can go back. That's the great thing about YouTube. This is different than TV. The great thing about YouTube is it's all on the channel, and you can go find it all.
History lives on.
Go ahead and dig it all up, man.
Scott Howard says, good morning, Monty and Jake. Tanner says, Gobert is such a snowflake. I think he's soft, Tanner. I don't think there's any doubt.
What do you expect?
Yeah. JP Shanahan says, got your message on YouTube that you awarded me a prize via Telegram. Thank you once again for that, but how does your Telegram system work? Yeah, it doesn't. That's the other thing that's amazing. Our channel has gotten to the point now where now people like try to replicate our channel to leverage listeners. And we're never going to message you directly on just know that we're never going to message you directly on YouTube.
Yeah.
We're never going to do that. We don't use Telegram. We do not. We use social media DM and we make you DM us.
Yeah.
We do not DM you. Period. It just, if anybody ever sends you a DM being like, hey, bro, you won, know that that's not accurate.
He's just a hack.
No. It just doesn't, it doesn't work that way. You can't trust anything that people say at press conferences, in my opinion. Totally agree with that.
Well, and that's
totally
the thing.
agree with
that's
that.
the thing. Like, again, to bring this full circle on the Zanik thing, like, I just think that the guy comes prepared to press conferences, as you would expect. I'm not criticizing him for that. But what I wish would take place in this organization, and it's not going to because the media won't make it happen, honestly. But what I wish would take place is I just wish they were more honest. Just be more blunt and straightforward. Like, hey, yeah, we do have continuity on this team because the core has been together, but we're missing something. And we have been missing something. And this goes back to the bubble 3 years ago. And we need to figure out what that is because we have a generational superstar in Donovan Mitchell, and we've got guys around him that really should allow us to win, and it's not happening. So that's going to be my priority in this offseason is figuring that out. Why is that so difficult to say?
Yeah, I don't know.
Why is that so difficult to say? I don't know. I don't know. I mean, we can blame the media. I mean, it is the media's fault for not pressing them, but at the same time, like, that's how this town works. So
yeah, and obviously there's a lot of people in the media in Salt Lake City that make their living on the Jazz and would never do anything to make that difficult.
And I respect that.
Yeah.
I respect that.
Yeah, Jeremy Bolton says press conferences, post-game interviews, coach interviews are stupid. No one ever says anything anymore. 100% of it is coach speak. Absolutely.
We'll get into a lot of that stuff in the offseason.
Yeah, what does that mean? Hey, bud.
By the way.
Hey, this is the offseason, just so you know. Ruff's official says they'll pander to Mitchell, a role player, not a superstar. They'll continue to lose, and he'll leave in 2 to 3 years. Could be right. I think you're going to find out now, though.
But hey, Ruffs, you're another guy just like that. You're another guy who is a Rudy Gobert supporter who cannot come up with anything tangible about why Rudy should get the ball more over Donovan Mitchell. Yet you still listen every day because we're getting things right. And you know we're getting things right, even though you won't admit it. So I appreciate you. That's what I'm saying. Like, all these people that come in here and leave these comments, like, great, do it. It helps us. We need you, dude. Like, please, thank you.
Tanner says, oh, hey, Ruff's official. I had a feeling you'd show up. Ruff says, don't worry, I'm here. Scott Howard says, this is the first year I haven't felt Don was clutch and looked hesitant in the clutch. I absolutely agree with that.
Yeah.
Scotty, I think you're exactly right.
Yeah.
I think I think Don wants to be clutch, but
he's passive.
I would love to be able to have an off-the-record, honest, one-to-one conversation with Donovan and ask him, why'd you pass that ball? Why'd you give that ball up at half court?
Well,
the ball that led to Mike Conley traveling, why did you give that up?
Why did you give it up in the bubble? Why did you give it up last year? Why did you give it up this year? It is a fair criticism of Donovan Mitchell.
Absolutely.
I'm with you. I think he is the guy that you should build around, but there's some caveats with that. He needs to grow up a little bit and take a step forward.
He has to perform.
Yeah, man.
I'll just say, I think he is going to be a murderer this summer. I think he is going to get in the gym.
Agree.
And I think he is going to build a mid-range game because he needs footwork and he needs a mid-range game. Those two things make him a much better defender.
Imagine if he could do what Jalen Brunson did in the paint. Like, if he could play that style of basketball.
And that's why a lot of people are saying that Luka is not as good as he is without Jalen Brunson, and I agree with that. I think Luka Doncic needs to be off the ball, and you always need a number two. And they don't have a number 2 in Dallas. They need Jalen Brunson. They need him. And they want him. I don't think they'll let him get away. I think they will pay dearly for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I just, it'll be interesting. And Garcy, what's up, my friend? He says, morning, actually doing some work today. Just stop by to give a casual high five to all the regular casuals. Good to see you and Garcy. He says, definitely catch the podcast on Stitcher. Shout out to Stitcher. And shout out to Luka's mom. How about Rudy to Houston? They have a couple of you talent we could develop or underdevelop. LOL. Yeah,
okay,
seriously.
see, but that's a conversation.
Houston, now, what is interesting is Houston was trying to get into the Russell Westbrook trade, and there are some people who believe the Jazz were the third team in that, and that the Jazz could have had Montrezl Harrell and Christian Wood, amongst others, in that deal.
Mm-hmm.
And that, to me, would have been a huge win. They'd have been a far better team in the playoffs.
Yeah.
A far better team. Scott Howard says, love Rudy, and he will always be a favorite Jazz man of mine, but it's time to move off of him. Ruff's official says, I wasn't sure if I chose the right show because they need to trade Rudy every show. Well, you know what? I don't know that it's – I think that tells you how much of a drag he's been on the culture of this team this year. I mean, I think that Rudy has been a significant talking point because he's been a significant issue.
What else is there, not to cut you off, but like the question I would pose to people who say that, and I respect that point because we do talk about it a lot, but what else would you talk about with this team? Do you want us to talk about, you know, like these gnarly trade scenarios that are unrealistic? Do you want us to talk about like Donovan Mitchell's issues in the community as far as getting shut down with the political stuff? Do you want us to talk about the free scholarship program? Like what else? Because Rudy is the thing on this team right now, and that really is the issue. Like, for better or for worse, Rudy is where we always end up going because he is the second guy, but he's the first guy on the payroll. So that naturally comes with a conversation. So that's why I say it's not like we wake up every day and we're like, all right, how can we hate on Rudy Gobert today? That's not the goal. But the goal is to have an honest discussion about where the organization is at. And I'm telling you, Rudy is the center of the conversation because he's not an offensive performer.
Yeah. Brett Robbins says Rudy Gobert for a bag of Skittles and a half-eaten Almond Joy will suffice just nice for me.
No, that was the Joe Ingles trade you're talking about, right?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
No, but they were getting Roco.
Yeah, okay.
Remember that whole thing?
Roco, right.
Yeah, Robert Covington for Joe Ingles was happening.
Right.
Get out of here.
Right.
Whatever. Daniel Westover, good morning to you.
Good morning, sir.
Welcome to the show. With Rudy, the phrase addition by subtraction comes to mind. Look at how great the Jazz played in that second quarter when the lane was open on offense. I want more of that. Yeah, no doubt.
And then what did you see in the next game? But this is a really good point. I'm glad you said this. What did you see in the next game? Quin put him on the floor, but took him out of the paint to try to get the best of both worlds. You want the defensive protection, but you need the paint to be more open.
Yes.
Well, you saw that adjustment. Now it didn't really work. It didn't really pan out. But these are the games within the game that you had that they were playing.
I think that's very well said. Kelsey Hamer, good morning to you. Bro, we need to move off Rudy so fast because he doesn't want to work on that. He wants to just be handed the ball even though he's offensive trash. I think there's something in that. I do.
And I thought your point about them showing him offensive tape, like Rudy to me, and again, this is just speculation, right? This isn't, obviously I don't have a credential and I don't spend time in person with Rudy, but based on his actions, he seems like somebody who is like, all right, hey, Rudy, here's tape of you bringing the ball down and turning it over. Here's tape of you trying to do a drop step to your right shoulder and turning it over. If you want the ball more, you got to work on that. And then he seems like the guy who would take that and say, no, that was just a one-off thing, or like just wouldn't take it credibly or wouldn't take it to heart and actually work on it.
Well, you can just see with Rudy's turnovers and his issue with offense is, one, his footwork is not very good offensively, but to play in the post as a big man, you need to understand how to use your upper body and your lower body together for leverage, and you need to understand that you can't. Rudy tends to dip his shoulder and stick his left arm way out, which is where the ball is, and that gets you a turnover.
Yeah.
He just doesn't have the fundamentals of that. And you can work on that. You can absolutely work on handle. What I don't think he'll ever be able to get to is a turnaround fadeaway jumper. He's not going to be a guy, one, he's just too clumsy, and he's not a refined athlete. He's not a guy that's ever going to have touch. He doesn't have Like if you look at Giannis Antetokounmpo and Rudy Gobert, they were similar players in that they always dunked. Now, Rudy's a 7-footer who rim runs. Giannis is an athlete that wants to run down your throat, right? But Giannis always had handles. Giannis always had a little touch around the rim. He had way more athleticism. But now he's turned into a shooter, and he's worked on that faithfully. He took it to heart. And it's paid dividends for him.
You saw it yesterday.
So, yeah, I think Rudy isn't that guy.
Yeah.
That's the hard part. JP Shanahan says, if Gobert wants to be a stronger focal point on offense, why can't he just work on his offensive game in the summer? That way Utah would have no excuse for not giving him the ball. Because I don't know that he's a 7-foot rim runner. Those guys don't win championships.
Isn't Rudy Gobert 30 years old now?
Yeah.
How old is he?
He's not young anymore. I think that's a common misconception that Rudy Gobert, I want to say that
He's
Rudy
29.
is but this is his 30-year-old season,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, he'll turn 30 this year.
Yeah, he is a guy
Next month.
He's not young anymore.
Yeah.
I want people to understand that. Donovan Mitchell, look at Donovan. What is Donovan? 24, I
I
think.
think he's 25 now.
I mean, Donovan is at a tipping point where he is.
Yeah, it's 25.
Where he's at a point where he is getting to the point where he's not young anymore.
It's time to get going.
He is at that point where in NBA time, you accelerate into a superstar or you fall back. Guys are playing into their late 30s. Donovan has 10 years of peak performance directly in front of him. But he's got to grow. He has to get better.
Look at where Devin Booker's at 25 years old.
Completely different player.
Right? So but also look at what the organization did before Devin took this leap. And this is what I think is so important. The conversation is not, hey, Devin is just a better overall player because he's just better. That's not the conversation. The conversation is, look where Book was 2 years ago on a struggling team with a struggling head coach, with a bad, supporting cast. They draft Cam Johnson. They draft DeAndre Ayton. They get rid of their head coach. They get Mikal Bridges. They get James Jones in the front office. So now what have they done? They put Book in a position to play with Chris Paul, who's taught him a lot, who's allowed him to take that step. So that's a huge portion of his development.
They also brought in a well-respected black head coach.
Yeah.
And I think in today's NBA, that's critical. I mean, I think when you have young players, young African-American players on your team, you have to have a young African-American coach.
Yeah.
I think that is respected. And Monty Williams was absolutely respected. And I think bringing in Chris Paul. So what is the dynamic that plays in Phoenix? You have a young black head coach that's respected, a younger-ish, a veteran guy, but he's not the old world. He's not Rick Carlisle. He's not. Monty Williams is a guy that has become one of the best head coaches in the NBA.
He's 50 years old.
Yeah, in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
He's become one of the best head coaches in the NBA. But the way that works is you have this guy that's turning into this great head coach, but you have one of the best point guards in the history of the NBA that's a veteran point guard who walks in the room dripping of respect, right? So you have a coach that's respected, you have a point guard that's respected, and you have this should-be better player in Devin Booker who then all of a sudden just grows leaps and bounds.
Yeah.
But what also happened there, you had a bunch of young talent influxed in the organization. You have a center that can shoot a jump shot. You have a guy in Mikal Bridges who walked into that team as a lockdown defender. You have a guy in Cam Johnson that's a knockdown three-point shooter.
Yeah.
You just have young melding with veteran, melding with respected coach that's black. I think it's a huge, huge component. I think that's the perfect scenario. And you have a young black general manager, and I say this specifically talking race with the Suns because of who their owner is.
Mm-hmm.
And you had to separate management, coaching, and players from that owner. And I think you're now seeing that that's paying the fruits of the labor.
And you're seeing Donovan Mitchell not having that as a big deal.
That's exactly right. And I think you have a very inexperienced owner. Very inexperienced owner. Something happening on your phone there?
Well, see, I'm a big Caitlin Collins fan.
Oh,
and
Jesus,
so I have Twitter alerts up for her. and she tweeted an update about how the U.S. ambassadors are trying to get back into Ukraine.
So, how much self-pleasuring did you do to the correspondence dinner the other night?
Dude, I mean, it was on replay like 5 times.
Yeah, forearm tendonitis.
Yeah, man. I mean, my left arm was a little sore, bro.
You are a huge Caitlin Collins fan.
Yeah, I am. Big
Yeah,
fan.
not so much.
Big fan, man.
Anyway, the point is, the Jazz have some work to do because your owner is wildly inexperienced. He's making mistakes.
Well, and he's being investigated. You know.
Well, the Suns owner.
Oh, you're talking. Okay, sorry.
Ryan Smith is not being investigated.
No, Ryan Smith is not.
Ryan Smith is young and making a bunch of mistakes.
Yeah.
And I think you have a general manager that I think is learning on the job, even though he is very experienced. Justin Zanik has never been the guy. And I think you're digging out of a hole from Dennis Lindsey. I am not surprised at all that Dennis Lindsey doesn't have a job. I'm not surprised at all.
But he's a well-respected and loved Jazz
beloved
legend.
member of the Jazz family, please.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Anyway, a couple more. James Knight says, rest assured they brought Danny Ainge in for a reason. This offseason will reveal all. I agree.
I hope so.
Jeremy Bolton says, Jazz need to build around Nacho Belgrande. I agree. But hey, stop being racist. Remember, we're racist because of that?
Yeah.
You know,